Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be reviewing Punisher Season 2. Now, I thought the first season of Punisher was great, up there with some of the best of the Marvel Netflix series. It was a strong continuation from Bernthal's incredible debut as the Punisher in Daredevil Season 2, although it did have some issues with pacing and padding, which most of these shows suffer from. So going into Season 2, I was excited. Punisher is one of my favorite Marvel characters, although he isn't quite what I'd call a typical hero, or even an anti-hero, but he's a character willing to take it a step further than most other heroes in the comics. Punisher Season 2 looked ready to show him in an even more comic-accurate light than Season 1 did. That being said, this season comes after the cancellation of the other Netflix MCU shows, with Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist all getting the axe. And with this and Jessica Jones likely to be cancelled as well, it put a damper on some of the hype. However, when this season came out, I watched it the same as the others, and while my hopes for this season were high, it ended up falling short of my expectations. But why exactly did Punisher's second season not live up to the first? Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss that. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications so you can see all of my content right away when it comes out. Now, as with my other series reviews, there will be spoilers in this video, so you should probably watch Punisher Season 2 before this review. But for those who have already seen it, let's get into this review. So Punisher Season 2 is really two stories in one. It all begins with Frank Castle living a new life under an assumed name after the events of Season 1. After what was essentially another war, Frank is doing his best to live a civilian life. He even finds a new girlfriend in a bartender at a bar that he frequents. Everything is going well for him. That is until he encounters a girl named Amy who is on the run. This quickly escalates into a larger problem, as assassins led by a man named John Pilgrim attempt to capture and kill Amy, which leads to Frank becoming involved and going on the run to protect her. Meanwhile, Billy Russo awakened from his coma that Frank put him in at the end of Season 1. He soon escapes from the hospital, forms a gang, and begins a crime spree. Frank must protect Amy and put an end to Billy Russo once and for all. Now, this season had a lot of potential to be really good, and these two stories could have been really interesting, but it's really the combination of the two in this one story that I feel ends up being its biggest problem. On one hand, the story about Frank protecting a girl from a group of killers is interesting. There's a strong dynamic between the two as Frank sees Amy much like he would a daughter. And once again, Jon Bernthal gives a great performance as Frank Castle, ranging from likable and charismatic to incredibly intense. He's very believable in this role and goes full on Punisher in this season. You really believe he's willing to go to any lengths to protect Amy. And Georgia Wiggum also does a good job with the material that she's given, although I feel like her character is written in an overly unhelpful and at times annoying way. Like for instance, there's several times where she causes more problems for Frank, such as being captured or putting herself in danger, as well as lying to him about things even though he's far too in at that point to keep him out of it. I also like John Pilgrim in this season. Being played by Josh Stewart, he's probably the more compelling of the two main antagonists here. He's a former member of organized crime who is forced back into life when Amy and others take incriminating pictures of a senator who is being groomed to be president. The senator's parents are a powerful religious family, whose daughter Pilgrim married, and they use Pilgrim's faith to justify him killing for them. He's kinda like a Bible-quoting John Wick, and as a result kills a lot of people in sometimes very brutal ways. He's made sympathetic to a degree because of his relationship with his dying wife, and how the parents are using his children as a bargaining chip. However, I feel like the season could have spent more time focused on him, as at some points he kind of just disappears into the background, and it would have made the ending to his arc feel more earned. The other half of the story involving Billy Russo suffers from many of the same problems. Billy was in many ways the true villain of Season 1, being one of Frank's friends going back to even before they were in the military. Billy betrayed Frank and his family and caused them to be killed. It was rewarding to see Frank brutalize and mangle him at the end of the last season. However, that was supposed to set him up for this season as the iconic Punisher villain Jigsaw, which we do get here, however not quite at the level of what it could have been or should have been. Now, Ben Barnes gives a good performance in the season as he did in the previous one, however the look that they give him as Jigsaw is really underwhelming. He's meant to be mangled and disturbing to look at, and at first they make it seem like he will be, considering that he wears a mask during his therapy sessions, but instead he ends up looking like he got mauled by a cat. As a result of the trauma from Frank attacking him, Billy is essentially an amnesiac. There's a question at first about what he really remembers, but it becomes apparent that he doesn't know that Frank was the one who attacked him, or why. So when Frank eventually shows up dressed in his Punisher gear to put Russo down, you can see real betrayal in his eyes. Again, this adds another layer that's meant to make him more sympathetic. He also has a therapist named Krista, played by Floriana Lima. She genuinely believes that she can help him and eventually falls in love with him. This seems like it was meant to be much like Billy's version of Vanessa from Daredevil, a female love interest who believes in the villain and aids him despite his heinous actions. But it never really connects on the same level as Kingpin's relationship did. Agent Madani also returns and is involved in this story after being shot in the head last season by Billy and surviving. Much of this season focuses on her obsession with Russo and how to stop him. She eventually brings in Frank to help, but she goes back and forth on her choices a little bit too much. Like when she has Frank torture someone for information, and she stops him. And then there's a time where she wants Frank to kill Russo, but changes her mind about it. This is also tied into a story involving Sergeant Mahoney, who's also been in the other MCU shows. Mahoney sees Punisher as a criminal and is constantly trying to stop him. However, by the end, he begins to understand that sometimes the line between right and wrong can get a little blurry. Again, this could have been a really great story arc, but its time was split with the Amy story. Neither story really connects at all either. I was wondering if at some point Billy would kidnap Amy, or somehow he and Pilgrim would encounter one another, but it never happens. They even have characters make note of how unconnected and disjointed these stories are, which doesn't really help matters. And after all that, the endings weren't very satisfying, especially for Billy, who was left to bleed out after being shot by Madani, and is just finished off by Frank. Pilgrim's is more satisfying, but again, it's not entirely earned. What this season really should have done was cut one of the storylines and save it for another season. Also, cut down the number of episodes so we have less scenes of people sitting around on couches talking about things that have already been said or could be conveyed visually. If they had done so, this could have been even better than season 1. Now, of course, this is an action series, and fortunately, there's a lot of that here too. Frank goes full-on Punisher here and kills tons of people in oftentimes brutal ways. He also gets messed up pretty badly himself along the way. The shootouts are intense, and there's more action here than in season 1, with other characters like Pilgrim also getting to shine, such as in a brutal bar fight. I was hoping that Frank would spend more time as the true Punisher in this season, and he definitely does. By the very end of it, he's donned his classic skull vest and jacket, and he's fully dedicated to the role. It's still not quite as good as Daredevil's amazing action scenes, but if you're here to see the Punisher waste bad guys with a host of weapons and tactics, you're going to enjoy this. There are also some cameos from fan favorites in the show at points, such as Turk appearing and Karen Page helping out near the end, although it's nothing really as substantial as in some of the other shows. And we don't get any appearances from the Defenders. Karen and Frank had some good chemistry and a strong dynamic that was established in Daredevil Season 2, but it seems like they weren't as interested in exploring it here. Although that could be tying into the idea that they're trying to push that Frank can't have a semblance of a normal life and is destined to be the Punisher. I also thought the editing seemed a little off at points during the season, and noticed a number of continuity errors, such as during a conversation involving Madani, although they may have just been something that I noticed. So overall, Punisher Season 2 is pretty good, although it's a definite step down from Season 1 due to the disjointed plot, unsatisfying endings, and some creative decisions that could have been done better. If this really ends up being the final season for Punisher, it would have been nice for it to have gone out on an incredible note like Daredevil did. But nonetheless, overall, I think that this show has been worth it. I'm going to give Punisher Season 2 a 7 out of 10. It's sad to think that this may be the end of Jon Bernthal's Punisher, at least for now. I've heard rumors of a possible season 3, but who knows if that's actually likely. If not, I hope that Disney doesn't go the reboot route on Disney+. I'd much rather just have these versions of Daredevil, Punisher, and the other Defenders show up in other MCU shows, or even in the movies. I know fans would love it if Daredevil showed up in Spider-Man, for instance. It doesn't even have to be R-rated for it to work either. Many of these characters are very adaptive, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So what did you guys think of Punisher Season 2? Did you like it, and where would you rank it among the MCU shows? Let me know down below. Also, if you're new to this channel, then don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.